Hello there, it's Michael Furlong from Rentrollmaximiser. The next audit that we will work through is audit number 4, and this has to do with the advertising compliance, whether we're tracking the advertising for a rental property. And it's typically done as either an audit by the department manager, maybe a team leader, or even a virtual assistant, to check to ensure that the advertisements that have gone online were in actual fact compliant and not of breach of the rental minimum standards, not in breach of the advertising standards, not in breach of false misleading standards as well. So when would we use this? Typically you would set up one of these audits for each property shortly after the rental campaign. So let's just run through the audit. So if I come over to here, we're looking at our tasks. We go to our template and it's 3704 or audit number 4, advertising campaign compliance. I'll click into this and I'll open and expand the tasks. Now, as you know, with most of our checklists, we have them also inside of our Trello boards. If I come across to category 37, and typically what I would do is I would build the checklist either in a Word document. I may even build it into a Trello card, and from the Trello card then I can overlay this into whatever software that you're using. So whether it's PropertyMe, PropertyTree, Colmio, Our Property, ALO, Managed, whatever software you're using that enables you to also have a workflow or a checklist. So this is really converting our paper checklist into a digital checklist, and often the software would have some automations as well. So let's just have a look at 3704, the advertising campaign compliance card. The audit of the advertising and marketing compliance documents may be undertaken by a department manager as part of the ongoing monthly property management file audit. Or the audit may also be done as part of an overhaul of the agency documents by a virtual team member when conducting a health check or operational due diligence. It could also be used for tracking KPIs. It's a KPI indicator. All advertising documents should be saved in an external directory like a Google Drive or a OneDrive or a SharePoint. And if I was to come across and we have a look at our properties, this is our folder. If I come back now into the actual property, what we're doing is we've got either our advertising documents here. So if you do have some advertising documents and they may be saved in different locations, you could save them into this dumping folder for a period of time until we were to go into the property documents here. And if we have a look at our property details, we've got our photo gallery, fixtures and fittings, warranties, manuals, utilities, key register, and internet advertising inside of here. So it'd be advertising photographs, and inside of that we've got our low and high res, disclosure statements, internet copy, floor plan and floor plates if you have them, internet listing, and the video if you're using a digital video or maybe a 360-degree video as well. So that's where you would save all of the information. As part of the advertising documents audit, ensure to update the labels and the workflow, rename any documents using the file naming process and version control. Now, it's really important to make sure that you are using version control, and version control typically would either have a version number and also a date. The objective here is that the next person that's looking at that particular document can see when it was last updated. Really, really important. Upload the audited documents to this workflow. This workflow should be set up for every existing property as part of the audit process. Then each time the property is being listed, use a re-advertising existing rental listing workflow. Not this one. This is really the audit. This is not talking about what you should do. This is really looking at what has been done and did it comply. Refer to the 2025 rental minimum standards workflow to confirm the property can be listed online. The property must comply with all 15 rental minimum standards prior to listing the property online. So it's really important that this particular audit part of it says, did the property comply with the rental minimum standards? Now, if the answer is no, if you don't have reasonable belief, and refer to those other checklists, so the other workflows and checklists, which is the 2025 rental minimum standards, and also you may as well try and set up the 2027 rental minimum standards workflow also. Set those up, and the property must comply with the rental minimum standards prior to advertising it online for a new renter. And the agent must be able to demonstrate reasonable belief. And so what we've tried to do is use the workflows as part of our evidence for that reasonable belief. If you have the appropriate documents, so you would have a rental minimum standards declaration, you may have an authority from the owner to update, to coordinate the inspection for a third-party company. You may also have a report from a third-party company. And if not, then the agency may do a walkthrough. And so all of these elements are contributing to your evidence to create reasonable belief. And the reasonable belief would be based on all of the assessment of the documents, our own visual, our photographs, our understanding of the property, our declaration from the owner. We believe the property meets the minimum standards, therefore we are entitled to advertise it online. If we come down to the description, now that actually sits inside of here, and I won't read it there, but there's a number of steps that the agent needs to follow. I'll read them here and I'll mark them off as I go. The agency must be able to demonstrate evidence that the advertising and marketing campaign complied with all laws, acts and regulations, both state and federal. The agency must be able to demonstrate evidence that they had a reasonable belief the property complied with all 15 of the 2025 rental minimum standards prior to listing the property online. If you don't have sufficient evidence, it's best to either not advertise the property and expose the agency and owner to a potential breach, or check with a supervisor, check with a team leader, check with somebody else to see what should you do in this situation. During the audit, you are looking for evidence to ensure that the photographs, videos, price, minimum standards, description, and floor plan are representative of the property in its current state, and properly describe the property as a renter would see when they arrive to inspect the property or receive documents to rent the property. And what do I mean by that? Well, you can't use photographs from 5 or 6 years ago. You can't use, because the property may look different. So if you've got a property photography, professional photographs where the garden was immature, so smaller plants, smaller trees, maybe recently planted, and 5 or 6 years later, the trees have all grown, you can't represent the property differently. You need to be able to represent the property as the renter or the applicants would see it at the time that they're attending an inspection. Step number 1, fixed price advertising. Ensure that there was a single fixed price rental amount in the advertisement. Under no circumstances can a property be advertised for a range, contact agent, or an empty rental amount, or the wording saying offers over. You must use a single fixed price for the rent. Step 2, misleading, deceptive, and misrepresentation. Check the advertising description for references to size, features and fixtures, location, quality, price. Check that it's accurate and remove any misleading statements. And a misleading statement, as an example, might be 5 minutes walk to the train station, where in actual fact it's a 15-minute walk. And so by definition, you are misrepresenting the distance between the property and the public transport. Disclosure requirements, step 3. Embedded networks, owners corporation rules, pet restrictions, move-in, move-out restrictions. Check for the accuracy. So my recommendation is that if there are specific guidelines, rules, limitations on the property, it's better to put those into the advertisement than to wait later on maybe the applicant may not have been fully aware of those restrictions or guidelines and have made an application only to find out later on that they in fact can't have pets because of the type of property, or that there are move-in, move-out restrictions and that there may be a bond that's applicable beforehand, or that there's an embedded network so they can't choose their own suppliers. It's important to have those ideally inside of the text or the description of the ad. Step 4, disclosure requirements. Owner looking to sell, mortgagee, commence proceedings, right to let the premises. So my recommendation is, once you've received the updated disclosure statement, one which is not more than 90 days old, you would use that information to compile the advertisement. And so if the owner was looking to sell, or there were some mortgagee proceedings that are happening, you may not necessarily put those into the ad, but you would certainly make the applicants aware of these at the time when they're making their application. So it would be advantageous to have a copy of the disclosure statements at all of your rental opens. Step 5, disclosure requirements. If there are any potential fees and charges expected of the renter throughout the tenancy, they have been properly disclosed, such as move-in, move-out deposits, professional cleaning, car stacker inductions, coin-operated laundry, as an example. It's really important to make sure that if there are any of those fees that would be specific to that property, that they're either noted on the disclosure statement or that you have evidence that the applicant was informed. Change that to 15. Step 6, rental minimum standards compliance. Is there written evidence the property complied with all 15 rental minimum standards at the time the renter took occupation of the premises? Going to change that back to 14. That's why it's there. And therefore, applications that were entered into prior to November 25th of 2025. And then we have a look. The 15th one came in on the 1st of December. So there were different minimum standards. Is there written evidence the property complied with all 15 of the 2025 rental minimum standards at the time the property was listed after the 25th of November? Now, you may be questioning why the window cords came in on the 1st of December 2025, but the requirement for the agency to have reasonable belief was introduced on the 25th of November. A little bit confusing with those dates, but it's important that you understand when the property was leased or advertised and what was relevant at the time. Step 8, property safety compliance. Did the property comply with the smoke, gas, electric, pool compliance requirements at the time at the commencement of the most recent tenancy? Step 9, disclosure. Was there an accurate and current rental disclosure statement for this property at the commencement of the most recent tenancy, not more than 90 days old? The reasons I use the not more than 90 days old is because if, for example, the rental provider said no, they were not looking to sell on Monday, and then the person signed up their property, and then on Tuesday they said, oh, I do want to now sell, and the lease is still going to go ahead, they can't start the advertising or the sales campaign for at least 90 days after they've said no and the person's moved in. So they've got that 3-month window. So that's reasons why I'm using that 90 days. There's nothing in legislation that says that a disclosure statement would expire. However, I'm using a 90-day period specifically because of that provision with regards to the difference between no, I'm not going to sell, and yes, I am. Step 10, false and misleading statements. Every point, feature, or description of the property and its features must be supported by facts and evidence that the agency can prove. Again, if I was to go back and say, for example, hardwood timber floors, well, they must be hardwood timber floors. If we're going to make a statement, they can't be a laminate timber floor. And so we need to be able to make sure that all of the items or the description or the way in which we've written our internet advertisement, that we have evidence or we can back that up with either a photograph, maybe a fixtures and fittings schedule, that we're able to. We can't be advertising for Miele appliances when we get there and it's a Technica, for example. So that's the sort of thing that's really important. That comes under the false and misleading statements. Number 11, step 11, property advertising photographs. Change the file name of each photograph to include an approved date and a hero. So I give the example, the hero shot. And so what I've done here is if you have a look, what I'm saying here is, let's just change all the photographs to an actual date. Now, if I'm using after the 25th of the 11th, or even on the 25th of the 11th, if I'm a new property manager and I came in and I looked at the photographs and I've not been managing that property previously, and I had a look at all of the photographs that were on file, I wouldn't necessarily know whether those property photographs are current or not. But if they've been renamed and it says a date, then I can assume that those photographs are appropriate. So that's why I'm suggesting to rename those. So whether it's a block, shower, bedroom, bathroom, garage, communal, whatever it may be, but then approved on the 25th of. And so by changing the name of all the photographs, it just makes it a little bit easier for the next person. Step 12, it is important that the agent responsible for the listing can, when asked, provide evidence that the property complied with the following section of the Act. Now, section 30D, and this is the disclosure statement. So it's really important that the disclosure statement was provided to the renter or the applicants prior to them being given a rental agreement to sign. False and misleading misrepresentation. The rent provider's agency obligation for the property to comply with all 15 minimum standards. So what we're looking at here, residential rental regulations, that's the 15 minimum standards. Section 65A, occupation of rented premises that do not comply with the rental minimum standards. And so this is where the owner is responsible to make sure that the property does comply. Penalty units is 60 penalty units for a normal natural person, or 300 for a body's corporate or company, which is what the agency falls under. On the 25th of November 2025, the change to the legislation now incorporated the agency, so advertising premises for rent that do not comply with the rental minimum standards. And so the agency and the agent is now responsible to ensure that they have reasonable belief prior to loading a property online that the property meets the rental minimum standard. So that's our description, and then we have our key points inside of here. Let's go and pop one of these into our property. Here's our checklist, and that's the description we just worked through. And let's have a look at one of our temporary properties. Now, I've removed all of the workflows, and let's just go in, and we've got a standalone home. We've got our photographs here, so we're going across to our task. We set up 3704, advertising compliance, today's date. Now, I don't believe that it's relevant to incorporate the renter for this one, so I'm going to remove the renter. Not really relevant in this scenario. Let's open this up. And so we have our notes here. I'll remove this one. We have our notes, and we've just gone through, and that's our description. Always important to make sure that whoever's completing this is fully across the procedure inside of here. Now, again, we have our owner, but we don't have necessarily a tenant, no need for that one, and we have our property here. So let's just work through this. So the first one, as with all of our checklists, is let's just go through and check to make sure that we have the right information sitting inside of the workflow. So there's a maximum of 50 action steps, and this one has in the template 50, so I can't add any more. So I'm going to move this across to here. So check and close off the points once completed, delete items not required, and leave unchecked incomplete points. The moment that I check this off, you'll notice over here, the automation just starts and it will change it to in progress. And once I started, I'm going to come over here, remove that label, and I'll put the work in progress label. Now, once I've completed it, I would be complete, and it's a blue label. And so you can use those labels as you work through. So let's just work through these. There's 50 of them, but the very first point is, the very first thing you do is go through and say, we have a house, and I'm trying to remove the things that are not relevant as we work through the checklist. So labels. The main thing that I'm looking for is potentially Owners Corporation rule. So confirm if the internet text includes reference to the Owners Corporations. It's a standalone home, so we don't need it. So we can delete that one. Move out, guys. We can remove that one. OC rules relating to 4 lease boards. Can remove that one. Confirm internet text includes reference to embedded network or gas and electric. Not relevant. Can remove that one. Confirm internet text includes reference to any disclosure statement responses. Okay, that is relevant now. And so we can come back through. Professional photographs, floor plan, 360 degree, upload, Owners Corporation rules. Again, that would be uploading them to this particular task. So we've got a copy of them in there as well. Update the labels, create detailed file notes. Right. So what we've done is we've ticked off our first one. And now, if minimum standards inspection hasn't been completed, use the label advertising missing minimum standards. So what I would do is I come across to the property inside of here, and I'll get rid of that. Minimum standards. And so what I'm looking for, I don't have compliant 2025 standards. I've got advertising missing minimum standards. So that's our very first one. So we'll come back over to our label and we would tick that. Now that basically says I can't advertise the property. And so that's what we would be doing to all of our tasks. If we were to go and if we had 100 properties and we set up 100 of these audits, you would first off, if you don't have evidence the property meets the standard, use that label. Now, if, for example, I'm going to come back to the property, remove this. If, for example, the property did comply and I did have a report, then what I would do is I'd get rid of that because we have a report. And then what we're looking through, it's a couple of these. If the minimum standards is non-compliant, use that label. If the minimum standards is compliant, then we're going to use that label. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, for the sake of this video, suggest that the property is compliant. So I'll come across here and I'll say minimum standards is compliant. So I'll come back to the property because I have a report and I'm going to say minimum standards, advertising, it's blue. And so we're now building out the information as we work through. So far we've deleted maybe 7 or 8 of the action items. Then what I'm looking for, I would go to the proof of ownership. Is the proof of ownership that's on file accurate, and do we have the right entity? This is really important to make sure, not necessarily for the advertising, but we want to make sure that we have the right entity because therefore the rental agreements will be correct, the disclosure will be correct, all of the documents will be correct. Let's just run through and say that that was compliant. Now, registered owners photo ID and driver's passport, do not upload these to PropertyMe. I may not have that, so I would be making a note at a later stage where I'd be making a note in here. It would be MF 23rd, 3rd, 26. MF audited the property and was missing these items. And so what you would do is you wouldn't do a note for each individual point because it's sitting there anyway. At the end of my audit, I would go through, maybe there's 10 documents that are missing that should be there. I would make an itemized list in the notes. So I'll leave that one. Was there a valid and enforceable exclusive leasing managing authority? And has it been updated after the 29th of the 3rd, 2021? I'm saying yes. Has the agent's fee schedule been updated since then? Well, if you've updated the authority, then yes, you would have updated your fee schedule. But sometimes the fee schedule may not be the agency's current one. Confirm or adjust the fees in the owner's property profile, referring to the updated fee schedule. So what I would do now is, before we move any further, I would come back over to here and I would get a copy of this particular fee schedule from my PDF. I would come back over to the owner and then I would look at, oh, okay, we've already entered in all of the fees and they look like there's 21 fees in here. They all look appropriate. And so what I'll do, I would come back to my advertising audit and say, can I confirm that the fees have been updated correctly? Yes. Upload a printed PDF of the internet listing or from realestate.com or the agency's website. So I would just simply go up here and I would say, 40277A, Little Oxford Street. I would pull up the ad. It's a property that I used to manage many years ago. Pull up the ad and it'd be the rental one. And what we would do is we would pull that ad up and print that PDF. And you can see here we've got our floor plan, and that would be uploaded into here as an attachment. Let's assume it would also be saved in our Google Drive. Now initially I would save it into this owner docs inside of there, and then once I finish the audit, then I would come into, sorry, not into there, I would come into the property and I would start to put it into the correct space inside of there. So we've updated the document, we've uploaded the document into the task. Copy the internet listing text and description to a Word document. Why would I do this? So I come over to here, I would copy all of that. Remembering this would be our ad, I'd put that onto a Word document. So I'd go and I'd create a new Word document and I would pop that in through to there, and then I would save that document. I won't save it now. I would save that document inside of, again, in here, and inside of that what I would do is I would write, yes, it's been approved by me on this particular date. Upload the recent disclosure statement, update the minimum standards declaration showing that all 15 standards are compliant, confirm the property was advertised at a fixed price. So I'd come across to my ad, for example, I think this is a sale. Yeah, it was a sale. And I would say, yes, the property was advertised as a fixed price. There was 1 month's bond, correct. The property attributes were 2-bed, 2-bath. Yes, that's all good. The internet text includes reference to any disclosure statement. So I would go back to my Word document and I would say, is there anything inside of the advertisement that I need to add from the disclosure statement? And if that is the case, then I'd say yes. If it was no, then I would delete it if it's not relevant. But there would be something inside of there, particularly if it's an owner's corporation. So our example here is it's a house, so it's not. But if there was an owner's corporation, inside of the internet ad, I would actually write owner's corporation rules apply. And it might be move in, move out guide restrictions apply. That would be in my advertisement. Confirm the PropertyMe is current, update description in the text. So we come back over to here. We've got information here. So if I was to come over, copy that. So now I'm starting to build out my document. So that's the description there. Check professional photographs. Are they still representative of the property as it is today? If not, then we need to coordinate. And then I would be going in, making a note. Photographs are no longer relevant. We need to update the professional photographs. Archive or delete the photography that's not relevant. I'd be making a note of it. These are previous photographs. I wouldn't delete them, but I would be archiving those. Rename the approved photographs in the Google Drive. Again, use them, hero shot, communal laundry, communal swimming pool, and then I'd put the approved date as well. As long as it's after the 25th, and I'm using the 25th of November because that's when the impact was, when the legislation changed that it was going to impact the agent, not just the owner. So yes, we don't have photographs. Check lifestyle photographs. Lifestyle photographs. Do we have copies of, let's just have a look at the photographs here. What have they got? No, they don't have anything. I know this only because I sold this building. I sold the whole block inside of there. Got a video, and so there's a floor plan in there. But when I was advertising properties, what I would do is I would have a copy of the local. There was lovely street, beautiful buildings. There's a tram just on Smith Street. We're not too far from the MCG. It's walking distance back into the city. There's lots of coffee shops along Smith Street. There's some really good cafes. The Coles is just at the back of this. There's a small walk you can walk through, cut through. So I'd have all those sorts of photographs that would be appropriate for this particular property as lifestyle photographs. Rewrite the internet listing, and these are the things that we would need if we needed to. So if we needed a professional photographs, okay, well we need that. We need the photographs, and then it's going to allocate this directly through to the property manager. Floor plan, lifestyle photographs. And then what I would ideally like to do is, particularly is if possible, is to have another person sign off on the internet, the advertising text and the internet ad, so that we've now, certainly we've now got a second party involved. I would also be sending the link back through to the owner before it goes live, so that they've got a copy of the internet listing, so they can't complain at a later stage when the property is vacant and say, well, the photographs weren't very good, or the internet text wasn't very well written. Update to labels, and again, come back over to here. So it would be compliant, missing, so floor plan, missing floor plan, photos. Need lifestyle photographs, photos, need professional photographs, what else? So board, can't have a board, OC board, that sort of stuff. So we would have all of those. We're now starting to build out the labels. Come down to below here. Update the labels of the property card to show the advertising compliance. Yes, that's good. Create detailed file notes. We would make our notes here, and then we would close off the task. So the person that would be really responsible for this, the majority of it would be a virtual assistant, an admin assistant, a property management assistant, receptionist, someone that's helping out with the back-end administrative tasks to help the property manager. This typically wouldn't be a property manager's role unless you're working end-to-end. If you are working end-to-end, then this is a great little tool to make sure that you've not missed anything. Remember, the objective of these checklists is to give you some consistent framework to work to. And now that we're converting from paper checklists across through to our PropertyMe or our digital checklists, we've either got them in our Trello board, as we've got here, or we're using them in our property management software. Either way, this is the best way to go around tracking and managing the advertising campaign and the compliance. Hope that's helped. Thanks for that. Bye for now.